Aged just 11 years at the time of her conviction, Sophia Constable is the youngest female inmate ever to have been imprisoned in Northallerton. On the 12th of October 1872, Sophia entered a shop in her hometown of Whitby. Its keeper, Mrs. Frances McIntosh, describes the events that transpired. "She came to our shop on Saturday night last, a little after 10 o'clock. She said, 'I want a twopenny cake for Mrs. Galilee.' I said, 'We've not got a twopenny cake, but with a threepenny loaf, will that do?' She said yes. I thought she was Mrs. Galilee's servant." Suspecting she'd been tricked, Mrs. McIntosh instructed her husband, Thomas, to follow Sophia, who joined a second, older girl before the pair disappeared out of sight. It turned out that Mrs. Galilee hadn't sent anyone for bread that day, which led to the arrest of both girls by John Ryder, Superintendent of Police at Whitby. 3 months later, on the 1st of January 1873, Sophia and her companion, 20-year-old Fanny Goodchild, stood trial for obtaining a threepenny loaf of bread by false pretence. "I shouldn't have sent for that loaf if I hadn't been hungered," Fanny admitted, while Sophia chose to remain silent. Sophia, at just 11 years old, was sentenced to 3 weeks' imprisonment with hard labour at the House of Correction in Northallerton, followed by 4 years in a reformatory school. Sympathetic to Sophia's young age and troubled home life, the arresting officer sent a letter to Captain Gardner, governor of the prison, a month prior to her trial. In it, he detailed the 11-year-old's dire circumstances, describing her living conditions as wretched and without furniture or food, and her mother as a convicted thief and prostitute. Concerned that Sophia could follow a similar path without intervention, John Ryder urged the governor to consider reformatory school as her best chance to live a happier life. At the age of 15, Sophia left West Riding Girls Reformatory School in Doncaster and returned to Whitby. She later married, had children, and at one time was working as a nurse. As he had hoped, John Ryder's influence resulted in Sophia living a fulfilling life until her death in 1932 at the age of 70. After its closure in 2013, plans to transform Northallerton's former prison into a retail and leisure hub began, and in 2023, the Treadmills development was completed. Its centrepiece is an 8-foot-tall sculpture named The Ballad of Sophia, created by Ray Lonsdale, a sculptor and artist from Durham. The sculpture depicts Sophia Constable holding a loaf of bread and a warden catching her in the act, serving as a poignant reminder of Northallerton's youngest ever female inmate and all those who were incarcerated in or worked at the prison throughout its 200-year history.
We had purchased the prison, which had been closed down by the Ministry of Justice in 2013. This building, which had been in Northallerton for a long time, a lot of people had walked past it not knowing what was going on behind the walls. So we wanted to really mark the history of the prison, and we didn't know what that was going to look like. So we wanted an artist to help us to visualise how that might be.
I've always had an interest in art. I was brought up around my father's self-employment business, which was steel fabrications, and then those two things came together eventually to lead me into doing what I do now.
What Ray proposed struck the most chord in me, gave me the most emotional response, I guess, out of all the responses that we received.
Sophia's story came to the fore. She was the youngest female prisoner that ever was in Northallerton prison. She was 11 years old. And she was given 3 weeks hard labour and 4 years in reform school for gaining a loaf of bread by deception.
And she stole a loaf of bread because she was starving. It wasn't because she was being naughty or cheeky or for a bet, it was because she was starving and needed something to eat.
It seemed like really harsh and really Victorian, Dickensian almost. You know, that story sort of speaks volumes of those times.
It's hard to imagine now, isn't it, that could even happen.
It turned out in the long run that it sort of saved her. So it was a really nice touch to give that aspect of a prison rather than just crime and punishment.
Ray sent back some ideas about the two figures of Sophia stealing the loaf of bread and being detained by a larger female figure which kind of represents authority.
What you're trying to do with art is you're trying to tell a story. The aesthetic of the piece is the craft. The way that piece is standing, the body language, that's to me is the art aspect. You're trying to get people to pick up on the emotion of it.
I had seen his work before and I was aware of the way that he worked and his large style pieces, his large scale pieces that really have a big impact in the landscape where they're installed.
You're trying to create detail and interest in every aspect that you put into it. But this has got a sort of a random twist and curve on there. The basic style I use is a 3D mosaic. It gives quite a harsh surface texture. So I wanted to leave that surface texture on the sort of the female prison guard's face, so she looked a little bit more brutal, I suppose. But Sophia was an 11-year-old girl. I wanted to try and smooth that face off to give her that youthful look.
I think it's a beautiful piece. I know that it will change and it will weather in, and I want it to be a landmark for Northallerton, so people will come to Northallerton to see it.
That's not going to slip in and out, is it? Fingers crossed it's all gone well this morning. Just needs a couple more straps on, I think, and then we'll be hitting the road down to there and the next part begins.
Very long-winded process to actually see it on site, in situ, where it's meant to be today. We're absolutely thrilled and we couldn't be happier.
Just excited and relieved and glad that it's in, and people seem to be reacting well to it already.
So impressed with it. It looks absolutely amazing. It's in a great spot as well.
The Sophia sculpture is one element of a wider programme of regeneration work across Northallerton. What we're looking to do is really create a high quality environment which will encourage more people to visit and encourage footfall and people to spend money in the town supporting the local businesses.
It's always a tad nerve-wracking. It's always nice to see what the response is going to be. I hope that it's something that people will come to see and they'll sort of see the story about Sophia and read up on it.
I think it's fabulous. I think it's a reminder of the past and how far we've come with regard to justice.
This is an excellent example of local authority working in partnership with historic England to create a cultural legacy for future generations to enjoy.
It's nice that the prison has been developed, but nice there's still the history of it here. That's just a lovely, lovely touch for the town, I think.